So both Coxes with their hands up still. No, Joe Gillette has brought his hand down, so we're just now waiting for Daniel Alton to be happy and ready. Oh no, still both hands in the air as we drift, and you can see just how strongly the water's moving. And here we go, first few strokes of the women's trial-8s for Oxford University Boat Club, and it is much bumpier than we had on Monday, even at this point in the race, Angus.
Yeah, absolutely, and like to get off that good start, they're just going to want to be really pressing out those finishes and sending that boat nice and level as the boat's coming up to speed.
I like the way, straight away, that Moto on Surrey struck by Heidi Long. I just think their blades are a little tighter down to the water than the blades of King Julian, and I don't know in terms of if they're going to be up, but I guess that the Heidi Long crew is a little bit up as they pass us at London Road Club. We get a look out of our window, and you know, that guess, I think, yeah, maybe by the briefest of margins, half a deck or canvas, or maybe just a canvas now.
Yeah, I think what I really like about the King Julian crew as well, which I think is why they're keeping up with him, is they look a lot more in time than the Moto crew.
So as we move now round the very first bend, it's a minor bend here, the one that goes through to Middlesex, but this is the opportunity for the crew on that station to capitalise ahead of that massive Surrey bend that that Moto will manage to get themselves tucked into and around.
Yeah, Heidi Long in stroke of the crew nearest us. She's not the tallest of women, but she's really getting out to it round the front end, just right round that rigger, so forward length. It's very impressive. I'm not sure she could get any longer than that at the moment, and I think the woman behind her, Sarah Marshall, the 22-year-old, is looking comfortable, the blue, and that stern pair combination's working really well. The umpire's warning them, Camilla.
Yeah, umpire moving them. Matthew Pinson clearly not happy with where they are on the water at the moment, but look at that distance that the crew on Surrey's managed to put in here, even in these early stages. Both crews at 35 strokes a minute, quite high, I think, actually, for a start in the race, especially when you think of them as being scratch crews. I was talking to Morgan Bain and Williams the other day, and she was saying at this point in the season, it's often about low rating, getting the crews together, finding a base rhythm and building on that. I think 35 is quite high for that to be a sort of gelling base rhythm.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you'd only want to be going up a couple of beats for the actual race in April. But yeah, like you say, it's all at this point in the season, it's all about developing that rhythm at that slightly lower rate. But yeah, they're really taking on these two crews first pass in the race, which is really important, both for the crew on Surrey, just to get that advantage before that first bend, and then the King Julian crew here on Middlesex, as we're seeing, as the crews are coming together, just to make the most of that first bend in their favour.
Okay, so I'm going to call it that Moto are going to win this race. I can't see the other crew getting back. For me, in terms of the coaches, it's how those women in this King Julian crew on Middlesex, the crew behind, actually deal with rowing behind. If they can produce any attacks, you know, whether they lose this race by 4 lengths or maybe just a length, and obviously that's an early call, it's their response to it that's going to be crucial. So we're going to see how Catherine King digs in, Sierra Sparks behind her, the Nova Scotian from Dartmouth. If you know Nova Scotia, it's just across the bay from Halifax, and that stern pair combination have got their work cut out.
And being placed into the stroke seat, Crossy, quite late on, you know, this change was made a day ago to put Catherine King right up there into the stroke seat. She's never been a member of a blue boat crew before, only a winning Osiris crew. That's a huge amount of responsibility. I'm sure she's feeling a little bit of nerves trying to prove her worth in that seat.
Yeah, but these King sisters, they're so tough. I mean, you know, I've seen them at LEH school, which is next to where I work at Hampton School. And they were in the women's pairs, the international pairs event at Henley, the Hambledon Cup, is it? And they rode in the semi-final of that when they were youngsters. She's tough as nails, that woman, and you know, and so we'll see the response at the moment. You know, the crew in front is moving steadily away. I just wonder how much, you know, Heidi and Sarah with Annie in the 6th seat, of course, is the president. I guess they'll want to put as much distance as they can between them and their opposition, Angus.
Yeah, I think so. Like when you want to really make the most of that bit before Hammersmith, perhaps potentially if we're going to have some slightly dodgier water later on, so that you take the pressure off yourself if you're ahead.
Yeah, loving that shot of the 2/8. You can see the 8 behind. That's Amelia Mills, the South African, right up furthest away from us in this 8, slightly on the right of your picture. Learnt her rowing at Vemapan Rowing Club, where she started at 16. Her inspiration was her mum, who rowed for South Africa, and both Amelia and the woman in front of her, Olivia Ramsey, both lightweights. I actually saw them race in North Carolina last season, I think, or earlier this season. They went over to North Carolina for the Lenny Peters Cup, and those two women were in the crew that raced and did very well actually in that crew. They're in the bow pair of this leading or this trailing 8 here.
Just looking at the differences at the moment between these two crews, to me it really seems like the rhythm in this leading crew Moto just feels that little bit more, it's created a lot more stability. If you look at the oars, you look at the blades and the way that they're kind of sitting above the water in that crew, in the Moto crew, and being very rhythmical. We've got a lot more sort of poppling blades in the trailing crew with King Julian. And Angus, I feel that, again, coming together in scratch 8's very difficult to look in unison at this point, having only had a week of training, but something's clicked in that leading crew just to allow them to look like a full unit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Heidi in the stroke seat, she has got quite a lot of experience stroking 8s before. I know she wasn't in the stroke seat for her Olympic 8, but she's got really strong rhythm, and she's just really relentless with it. And that's what you want in a stroke woman. And also the 7-1 behind you, just really being so consistent that you can just pump out that rhythm, so that all of the crew can feel it.
It's a really strong stern 3 that we've got here in Heidi Long. Sarah Marshall, who was at 7 for Head of the Charles, right, one of the only racing experiences we've had so far for the 2 blue boat crews out in Boston. And then Annie Anazakis, who's bringing that boat race experience from last year as well. This is a stern 3 that I could see, you know, in the race in April, Crossy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think someone like the 7-woman Sierra Sparks is probably going to maybe fit in somewhere like the 4 seat or possibly the 2 seat if the technique's up to enough. I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying about the back end of the stroke. That's as the blades come sort of close towards us. We call it the finish in rowing. And those blades of this of Joe Gillette's crew, the crew closest to us, you know, they just want to hold it out a little more. You just see that dark blue tip appearing, you know, an instant before you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to keep it really pressed out on your feet to keep that connection all the way through to the back end. But what I do like about what the King Julian crew is doing is they've got this really nice swing around the back end. So perhaps they're just losing a little bit of connection through their feet, but that's generating also quite a nice rhythm around the back end too.
You are so positive, Angus.
But again, I think technique models, right? We look across the 2 boat race programs that we get. We talk a lot about models of technique and trying to get people that have come in from rowing in blue boats before, rowing in the reserve crews, rowing in international programs, rowing for their colleges, and getting them all to row in that same blueprint of technique. What do we think Alan French is trying to achieve here as his kind of stamp on a technical model in his 2nd year?
It's a bit difficult to say really at this point in the season, because we haven't seen a lot of the crews, but I think it's a statement of intent to, you know, put Heidi in that stroke seat. What I really like about what she's doing is a really leg driven stroke, and that's what's giving them really good power through the water. And actually, so if we look at last year's crew that Alan was coaching compared to the year before, it just looked like they had so much power under the water in comparison. And despite the fact it was pretty well the same group of girls.
Just see the stroke rate down there in the bottom left of your screen. 34 strokes a minute for the trailing crew. That means they're really battling all the way, as we suspected, to try and close something on that gap. You can see the water kicking up. Just a name check for those in Moto. That's the leading crew. Cox Daniel Orton, the 19-year-old, just going past his boathouse at Latimer Upper School. Fantastic rowing school that. Heidi Long, you've heard us talk about her in the stroke seat. Sarah Marshall, Annie Azarkis, the Aussie president in the 6th seat. Polina Daniela, she's in the 5 seat because she sets it up really well. Her parents played volleyball and handball for Russia. And Hermione War in the 4th seat behind her. King Sailor wants to sail around the world. These look like sailing conditions they're coming into now. Indigo Buckler, the 26-year-old lightweight, learnt her at St Hugh's College, and she's one of those dev athletes, development athletes. Erica Dutton in the 2 seats from St Edmunds Hall. And at bow, Sarah Paulson, the Princeton lightweight who's come into the programme this year. Comes from Chicago. She's won lots of medals at the IRAs, which is where the lightweight women race their national championships, and that's the lineup of the crew that is leading. And I guess Camilla will talk you through King Julian.
Yeah, why not? I'll give you a roll call on King Julian. So that's the training crew on the left-hand side of your picture. Joe Gillette, the as we say, already blue boat vest from last year and 2022. In the stroke seat, Catherine King. We talked about her and her sister, her twin sister Gemma King, who's part of the Cambridge squad. She was an Osiris winner this year in March. Sierra Sparks, the 26-year-old in the 7 seat, who actually learnt to row at Oxford University. But just whilst I am roll calling through this crew, here come these conditions that we've been anticipating. It really has roughed up. To finish up this roll call, Tessa Haining at 6, the American who was at Harvard Radcliffe until recently. Alexia Lowe, the 21-year-old at 5, who was also part of that successful Osiris crew and learning to row at Oxford as well. So an amazing step up for her. And then Tara Salaba in the 4 seat, Jen Astley at 3, Olivia Ramsey at 2, and Amelia Mills in the bow seat. But would you look at this? Here come the stroke rates right down to try and contend with these conditions, Angus.
Yeah, I think it's all about not making mistakes in these conditions. From this shot, it doesn't look too bad, but I promise you, sat in that boat, you're getting thrown around all over the place. Rowing's a balanced sport. You should be balancing the boat really nicely, and if you're being thrown around all over the place, it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah, so, you know, if I was looking at King Julian now, I'd say, you know, decent job really from, I guess, Harrods around to this point. They haven't lost too much on the leading crew, Motor, who are now moving a little bit out. That's an interesting decision by their cox, Daniel Orton, whether Joe Gillette will follow him. But I think they've stuck at their task. The leading crew haven't moved out anymore. They're, you know, okay, so they're difficult conditions. But the guys following in the launch are saying the wind's vicious at this point, and here we sat in London Marine Club, so we're not out on the launch. But to me, it doesn't look as tricky as it was for the Cambridge women. And you know, I think the women, these Oxford women, are handling it well.
Yeah, do you know what, Martin? I think what has happened is there's probably a portion that was about, you know, 500 metres or so ago that was much worse than what we ever saw on Monday. But as a sort of whole course, on average, it's probably a little bit better at this point in the race, you know. So that wind direction makes a huge set of difference. And we talked on Monday too about the uniqueness of the sets of conditions. You need everything to kind of line up: wind, stream, tide, height, everything, and that produces a completely different thing on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really important in being able to adapt to all those conditions is actually not changing your rowing technique. And I think the crew out in front, Moto, has done that really nicely. They brought the rate down slightly but kept the same rhythm, and they just eked out through the rough water. And yeah, that's really nice what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, you know, we're looking at the back of Joe Gillette, the coxswain from last year's boat race, and I think the 22 women's boat race too. So double blue, and it's really important what he's saying now, because the women will get a shout of who they want to cox them. So the experienced women there, the likes of Catherine King, maybe not Sierra Sparks so experienced, but Tessa Haining, who of course is a blue, they're going to say, well, we prefer this guy because of, and you know what Joe Gillette says to them at this point, even though they are down, is going to be really crucial. So how is he handling, how is he helping these women to get the best out of themselves on the second half of this boat race course?
I think just sticking to the plan that they agreed on before, sticking to their rhythm, and not letting giving them hope, but also not letting them give up, basically.
One of the things that Grace Prendergast talked to us about on Monday, from her experience of doing trial 8s and being in the Cambridge setup, was about using simplistic cues and choosing what those simple cues were going to be for a crew that's so new and they're not used to training together. I guess, Angus, it would be good to know, and as we watch the men paddling up ready to start their race, do you find that the Oxford crews will use similar kinds of cues so that you can swap in and out? You know, we had a last minute change, someone's come into the boat, all those kind of things. Do you want a simplistic cue that everyone's going to use, all 18 athletes, or is each boat going to have their sort of individual things that they want to focus on?
I think it'll be a mix of both. So to actually prepare for trial 8s, each crew will have a different couple of maybe 2 or 3 technical points that they'll keep coming back to. Because, I mean, you don't want that many technical points to think about when you're at this point in the race. I mean, you're going to be absolutely exhausted. You're going to be dribbling at this point. So you don't want to be thinking about an awful lot. So keeping it really simple is really important for the river.
All right, to my way of thinking, the crew in the lead moto need to be taking more distance out of this King Julian crew. I think they need to be ruthless. I think Heidi Long and Sarah Marshall got to put that together. I think Annie Anazakis needs to be saying some stuff. I think there's a lot on the shoulders of Dan Orton, their Cox. For my money, they need to extend this distance by a couple of legs by the time they get to Chiswick Bridge. And you know, all right, the win's there, but it's not that you won, it's how you do the win, and they need to execute.
I think you're right, and just by eye, Martin, you know, they've tidied it up a little bit now. I wonder if there's been a call, but the blade work, just even from the difference between what we saw a few minutes ago and now, it had started to slip. There had been some, you know, not mistakes, but just a little bit less sharp on the catches, not quite as set from the back end coming up towards, and I think that's kept that distance where it is, rather than stepping on.
Yeah, and I think Alan will be looking at that as well. You know, which crew wins or loses is almost a bit irrelevant here. What the coaches are interested in are responses throughout the race, because it's a changing race all the way through. So what he would really want to see is exactly what Martin was saying earlier, just squeezing it out an extra couple of lengths, and also what the Coxes are calling in the boat.
I do want to say a little bit more about Heidi Long, because part of the story of the Olympics wasn't just that, you know, she won that amazing bronze medal, but it was about her dad, who very, very sadly passed away, but not before he bought the whole family tickets for the Paris Olympics. And the story of her father passing away was Heidi Long's story of being in Paris. She went trekking, I think, with her brother in the Himalayas, climbed a very tall mountain peak in the Himalayas. She's a good sort of duathlete or triathlete, went running in the Lake District, and she has the same birthday, would you believe, as Claire Collins, who we saw stroke the Cambridge Victoria's 8 that Gemma King was actually in the bows of in the 2 seat on Monday, which is an incredible coincidence, because Claire and Heidi used to race each other as under 23s. They didn't really know each other until they met at the Challenge. So a lovely little story there to play out, I think, as Oxford and Cambridge women go through this season.
A story of parallels. I feel like that's always the case with boat race, right? Two squads trying to achieve the same thing in parallel, but only one can win on the day. And Martin, I think that the motor crew must have heard you, because they've started to extend out again here under Barnes Bridge.
Well, you know, I do have a little link in to Daniel Orton. No, only joking. But yeah, to my money, that's kind of what you've got to do. You're sniffing the finish, it's coming up, the water's going to cut up as they go through Barnes, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting last 3 minutes.
Now, oh, sorry, Angus. What I was going to say is, now in the Cambridge women's trial 8 race on Monday, there was a point where we believe actually there was a technical issue which created a huge distance between the crews. We didn't spot it on the commentary, but having spoken to them after the race, they said there was a technical issue in the losing crew, which meant a huge distance. Now, if you're Alan French, you know, this, again, meant to be match crews, no issues or drama that we can see. Is this concerning that your crews that are meant to be matched are so far apart, or is this just a learning opportunity that you would be prepared for, Angus?
I think it's more of a learning opportunity rather than any cause for concern. I mean, you can only work with what you have in your squad, and we don't know an awful lot about what's been going on behind closed doors. So the ranking of the athletes, I mean, they should be matched, but also the crews might not just gel. If you rank all the athletes and you pick supposedly match dates, and those people in 1/8 might just not gel with each other.
It's very true, and you talked a lot about combination seeking, right? This is a really good opportunity to seek out combinations, your stern pair, your bow pair, your middle, your engine room. And for me, it is very, very obvious, like we said earlier on in this race, that the Heidi Long, Sarah Marshall stern pair combination is one that surely is being looked at and assessed. But I can't quite figure out in this King Julian crew where the combos are that might be being sort of looked at.
Yeah, it's a good shout. I think as we see leaders Moto, if you don't know Madagascar, Moto is a virgin talking hippopotamus, and King Julian is a ring-tailed lemur.
I like that you had to look at your notes to find out that King Julian was a lemur.
I don't trust myself. But nice height off the back end in that choppy water. It's less choppy than for the Cambridge women. I like the way they're coming off the back end, this leading crew. They have moved out on their teammates from King Julian. I think that's job done, executed. It would be nice to see, like we saw from the winning Cambridge crew, a really little decent sprint up to the 36 or something like that. At the finish, that was a really impressive view, and we do get a nice side shot from our camera at the finish. So let's maybe compare the winning Oxford women's boat, or what seems to be, with what we remember of the leading Cambridge women's boat from Monday.
Well, one of them stopped before the line, didn't they, in the Cambridge one on Monday. Let's see if Oxford have watched that and learnt from that particular mistake, because again, that won't be something that you want to repeat on boat race day.
Yeah, I think you can see how tough it has been for the trailing crew, and they've only been in this combination for a day. They've had to change it because of illness. There's lots of reasons for this result, which of course Alan French will know more about, but I think you can see it from the women in the bows, Olivia and Amelia up to and bow in the trailing boat. They have put their all in. Olivia is sort of, look at her blade now, she's catching the water. She's a much better rower than you're seeing now, but that's because she's put so much effort in. Here we come up to the finish.
Well, in 116 days' time, they will be coming up to the finish of the Women's Boat Race 2025, the 79th Women's Boat Race, and it will be around about this time, in fact, as well. But what a great-looking crew here. I think they should be extremely satisfied with the way that they've rowed this race from the off. Heidi Long, Sarah Marshall, Annie Anazakis, Paulina Danilina, Hermione Indigo Buckler, Erica Button and Sarah Paulson, Coxbike, Daniel Orton have finished this race well ahead of their counterparts. A small issue there in the bows. I think that was maybe bow seat Amelia Mills just missing a couple of strokes there. It must be getting tiring at this point, to put it very, very lightly, Angus.
Yeah, and you're really testing yourself, like the limits at this point, and that's perhaps why we're seeing some of these mistakes come through. And it's your responsibility as an athlete to manage yourself all the way through the race. So this will be a great learning opportunity for those girls.
Yeah, look at her, she's just down there over a blade, put everything into that race.
And we've seen it in boat races gone by, even to the point of as recently as this year, right? We talked about Matt Edge from the Cambridge men's crew just this year, pushing himself and finding that limit a little bit too early in the race on boat race day. Is this an opportunity, like you say, Angus, almost for these athletes to test that limit, because they would rather do it today than on boat race day?
Yeah, absolutely, and that was ridiculous in that boat race. That was a wrong selection, in my opinion, to be honest, which might sound a bit controversial, but if you can't manage yourself towards the end, like to actually complete the race, then that's your responsibility as an athlete. You have to be able to do that. So for these girls, this was an opportunity today to really push your limits and perhaps adjust it on for the boat race or for the Osiris race too.
And I feel like it's a fine balance here, right? Because we've got to remember this is part of selection. You know, it is a crucial and critical part of the selection, is this Trials 8 event. There's still plenty more testing to come after Christmas and after the New Year, right? They'll go through oodles of seat racing, training camp, but you want to impress, but you also want to find data for yourself on where that limit is, and you'd rather make the mistake today. But yeah, you also don't want to forfeit your seat in the boat as somebody that is identified as unable to complete the race.
So let's take a look at how this race unfolded. You've got the Moto crew with Heidi Long on this side, and you know, blades tight down to the catch at the front end, and as we thought, they had that narrow lead as they came past us. And Fulham Football Club, which is an incredible place actually, that new stand, is not completely finished on the right of your picture, but you know, sensational view. You can see there's a move here coming from one of the crews, just moving inside, and Joe Gillette is coming, and he's moving towards the leading crew, and he kind of thinks, well, they're faster than us, so basically I want to get in that water. And once he's got the advantage of that bend, he does move in behind the Moto crew in the front.
Yeah, and perhaps he's just searching for a bit of extra water there as well, because over in that Middlesex side, that's perhaps the slower water, and he was just trying to give his crew every advantage possible.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. I mean, Joe Gillette is the name. He's got the experience. He was a super lad at Hampton School, coached by John Neville and Colin Greenway. And
did you teach him crossing?
Yeah, I think he is the experienced guy. I'd love to have had a megaphone on him or a microphone just to hear what calls he was making.
Well, do you know what? We might get to find out, because I know that these coxes have been mic'd up for the Turning the Tide documentary, which will be coming out in February. We saw it for the first time this year, the series that was released back just on the lead up to the boat race. And I know that these coxes have been mic'd up because I was talking to the guys at Road 360 on Monday after Cambridge, and they were showing me some of the footage where they had got great little snippets of that inside the boat feeling. So do keep an eye out for that Turning the Tide documentary round 2 coming out in February.
Yeah, I was talking to Ben Tufnell. Look at that choppy water there that the crews are dealing with. It's going to be worse than that for the men, and you can see the women are dealing with it pretty well. Not too many blades hitting the water, but it is going to cut up, I think, because the tide will be higher as it's coming in all the time. That will make it worse, but you know, to me, I don't know what you guys thought. The women dealt with it pretty decently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really key thing in that water is just making a bit more shape at the back end of the stroke. So when they push it out to the body, they're just pushing down on the handle just to give a bit more clearance of the blade through the water. I think they did that really nicely in both crews.
Yeah, we can see the leading crew. That is Moto, stroked by Heidi Long, coming to the finish, and they look pretty decent, and that was how Moto won the Oxford Women's Trial 8s.
Yeah, I think it was won on that very nicely set up rhythm, that ability to ride out that bumpy part of the course in the middle and then extend on at the end. But there we go, that is the conclusion of Trial 8 for the OUBC women, and that will be their last time to race the full course side by side until boat race day. We'll of course see them in the fixtures taking place in February and March.